Hello, and welcome to the Ombudsman program on Dayton Access TV. Thanks to the viewers for joining us for this program. Today we have a most interesting exhibit that's on display at the Dayton and Montgomery County Library downtown, and the exhibit is entitled Undersign, the Redline. And the logo for the exhibit, I believe the viewers can see on their screen. So to help us learn more about this exhibit and to prepare many of you, I hope, for your visit to the exhibit, I have with me today Kristina R. Scott, the CEO of Learn to Earn Dayton. Welcome, Kristina, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. We also have with us Brian O. Martin, AICP, Executive Director of our Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission. And I just want to tell the viewers that his credentials, AICP, actually mean that he has a lot of experience and a lot of training, many years, and receives this high certificate in his field. So welcome, Brian, and thank you for coming to talk about this exhibit with us.
Good morning, Diane. It's great to be with you again. And yes, I'm old.
Oh, I didn't really mean to imply that, but it's the experience that gets you that wonderful certification. So today's program highlights and explores the Undersign, the Redline exhibit, which is currently, as I mentioned, at the Dayton Metropolitan Library. According to the creators of this exhibit, it is a framework for unearthing our most deep, systemic, and entangled crises. The exhibit and curriculum explore the history of structural racism and inequality stemming from the 1938 redlining maps until today, and these systems can be undesigned. The exhibit is traveling nationally, and you will learn the opportunities that you have to see and participate in this exhibit in the Dayton and in the Montgomery County area. Kristina, please introduce Learn to Earn, your organization, to our viewers, and add in there to tell our guests and viewers why Learn to Earn decided to work to bring this exhibit to Dayton.
Thanks so much, Diane. Learn to Earn Dayton works across Montgomery County to ensure that every single person has the opportunity to live, grow, and thrive, to have a quality education and a career where they can have economic prosperity. And Ohio needs to add nearly 1 million more people with valuable post-secondary credentials to our economy by 2025. And so in Montgomery County, we set a goal that 60% of Montgomery County residents would have a valuable post-secondary credential. And when you dig down into that, you see that there's a disparity gap between Black and white. And so relying on census data, which is what we have to go on to break it down by race, only 20% of Black Montgomery County residents have a bachelor's degree or higher, while 29% of white Montgomery County residents have that bachelor's degree or higher. And while we really advocate for a broad range of post-secondary credentials, we still need more folks with bachelor's degrees than anything else, so you can get to be an AICP in your profession. And education is closely tied to income. And so within Montgomery County, the median household income for all people is $51,542. For Black families, it's $32,140. And for white families, it's $58,205 a year. So that's about a $26,000 gap between Black families and white families. And that doesn't happen by accident. When you see a gap that big at the systems level, at the county level, it doesn't happen because of individual choices. It really happens because systems are in place that create that kind of whopping gap between prosperity for Black families and white families. And so at Learn to Earn, we recognize that these issues are bigger than any one person, and they're baked into our systems of laws and policies and what we consider to be personal preferences. And so that's why we decided to bring Undesign the Red Line to Dayton, because we don't have the same kind of history around race that you do in the South, but we see the disparities nonetheless. And so redlining is one of the ways that has perpetuated the disparities in wealth and income between Black families and white families.
Oh, thank you very much for that good introduction to your organization. And you mentioned, I think, the Learn to Earn's big goal, but I'd like to ask if you would just repeat that for our viewers.
Our big goal is that 60% of working age adults have a valuable post-secondary credential by the year 2025. And that is a goal that the community as a whole set for itself. We're the keepers of that goal, but it's a community-wide goal where we share accountability and share our work together to help meet that goal.
Okay, and what again is the date by which we hope to attain this important goal?
2025.
Okay, so we're
just a few years away.
Yes, we're moving toward that. All right. Very good. Brian, can you introduce Miami Valley Regional Planning to our viewers?
Certainly. Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission is a 56-year-old organization. We have a large board of directors, about 90 now and growing. We cover a 5+ county region. Dayton, Miami County, Greene County, all of Montgomery County are members in MVRPC. We also have 4 jurisdictions in Warren County, and we also have Preble and Dart counties also to our west. Traditionally, we've been involved with surface transportation, and we receive a lot of federal funding to make sure that projects get built here locally. Interstates as well as trails, replacing transit vehicles, highways and bridges as well. So we're involved in a lot of things that pertain to our quality of life here in our region. I would add water quality as well. We have a small contract to work in that field. But when you look at our region and how it has been suffering for some time economically, we're a very segregated community based on race, economics, education. If you just look at the map that's shown on the screen, all of this really goes back to lending practices at the turn of the 20th century. And so we'll get into that more in a few minutes. But really, this area, you know, you think if you build it, they'll come. Well, that's worked to a degree. Now, if you build it, you may also pull people away from other areas in town. And that's certainly what's happened in the Dayton metro area. If you look at our overall population, it's been very flat. Well, it's rearranging the deck chairs. When something new gets built, a new neighborhood or a new interchange or what have you, that's really what you start to see. And we'll get into some of this discussion a little bit later. But really for us, equity is the unfinished work in our profession of transportation planning, city and regional planning. We have to make sure that everyone has access to opportunity. We started this work in 2015. We published our reports in 2017. And if you just look at the maps and look at the data, we just had to do something with it. So we got into this, rolled up our sleeves, and we started working with organizations like Kristina's in this area of equity and access to opportunity.
Thank you, Brian. Wonderful overview. If we could take the slide back a minute to the slide on redlining instead of the opportunity slide, I'd like to focus a little bit on that. I wish it could be larger, but I also thought this when I was in the exhibit. I guess it's just harder to see some of these things, but redlining began in 1934 when the Federal Housing Administration was established to ensure mortgages and prevent foreclosures on homes. And then the now defunct Homeowners Loan Corporation compiled a map of the zones, the areas, and we're seeing that in front of us now. So I'd like to have either of you or both of you describe a little bit more about what we're looking at this map. I recognize that people can probably see the river going through the center of Dayton on this map, but then we also have colors that you all can tell us about because the color code is really not legible for viewers at home. So Kristina, would you like to start?
Sure. So if you look on the map and look at the green areas, that's the first grade prime real estate when the maps were created in the early 1930s. And so you see there's one section in Northwest Dayton that is the first grade real estate. That is the only first grade real estate in the entire city of Dayton. And then you go south to the south suburbs and you see the prime real estate there. The blue is second grade, so good, not as good. If you were trying to get a mortgage there, maybe you'd pay some more points or they'd be tougher on your appraisal, but you could get a mortgage. The yellow is C, and the C grade property was C grade because there was what were called infiltration of hazardous persons or immigrants living in the community, or it was next to communities where Black families lived. And then the red is redlined. Banks would not insure a mortgage, which meant you could not get a mortgage, a traditional mortgage from a bank for properties in the red area. And if you were to purchase property, you probably had to pay all cash or do a lease to own or pay an exorbitant interest rate. And so what that meant is that Black families did not have the same opportunities to buy homes and to build generational wealth as white families did.
Yes, thank you. Brian, what would you like to add to that description?
I would say that's the description, and with that, you see, the river there dividing our community east and west. It's the interstate there too, along the river, that fortifies that division, and so all of that stems back to where people were allowed to live as they migrated up from the south and what have you. There were certain neighborhoods that would allow Blacks to come up from the south and immigrants to come into our communities. And so typically that was C or D grade communities, as Kristina was walking through the map.
Yes. And so those areas then did not have any of the advantages of the prime real estate areas. And as Kristina said, the families couldn't build that generational wealth because most of it is in housing for most of our families. Now we have the opportunity map up, and I would like, Brian, this is your organization's map. So I'll turn to you first here on this one. And maybe you can talk to us in terms of the colors again, because I think that's what we can best see here. And then I'll come back and let Kristina comment on it as well.
Yeah, this map was a part of our work with the Ohio State University Kirwan Institute over in Columbus. But we use local data and our GIS to overlay several mapping themes, and this popped out. Certainly housing and education, the transportation network, food and stores, work, places of work and employment were used for our entire region here. And so as the legend shows, the green color shows areas with higher access to opportunity than, say, the brown colors. So as you look at East Dayton or Southeast Montgomery County, and if you look at kind of Northeast and Eastern Greene County there, coincidentally along 675, you see a lot of the access to opportunity. When 675 was built in the early 80s, starting in the early 80s, there was a reason for it to better connect Columbus with Dayton. to provide better access to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and those communities in western Greene County and eastern Montgomery County. But we see, if you follow the path of the green there, a lot of that is sandwiched within 675 and just beyond, as well as 75. So that's, as I would call it, an unintended consequence of that needed transportation improvement, and that we have that legacy continuing today. If you contrast the green areas, there's some yellow areas that are throughout the map. You see that in southern Montgomery County and some in western Montgomery County. But you see that dense concentration there in northwest Dayton of the brown areas. And coincidentally, we're talking about brown people in this discussion. We probably should have chosen a different color. But that is, kind of the nexus for what we're seeing as lower access to opportunity. So places of employment, you have to travel farther to those to jobs. It's more expensive to live there for that reason. Houses are maybe underwater, may be undervalued in those areas, that type of thing. So the HOLC map that we saw before certainly was a precursor to what we're seeing here. And this is 2014 data that we're showing. And we know from the 2020 census that we've seen some snippets of it. This certainly has been continuing for some time.
I see. Christina, would you like to weigh in on that?
So what's stunning is that the redlining map was created one time. It was a point in time. And even where there were neighborhoods that were integrated, if those neighborhoods were designated as red, then that was a signal to white people to move out. It was a signal for redevelopment, that the property could be redeveloped, demolished, and rebuilt as something else. And they became places where we had lower investment overall. And so whether it's where the interstate was put, I-75, there were lots of discussions about the pathway that I-75 should take through Dayton. And it ended up going close to the river, but really dividing Dayton into east and west. And so it's stunning that the redlining map is just one of those things that it was a point in time that has really influenced what the landscape of our city looks like today. And yes, again, you can see it in the access to opportunity. Because, I come from a decidedly middle-class family. My dad was an engineer, my mom was a teacher, but my great-grandparents owned their own homes. And so we're not rich, but I got to graduate from college without any student loan debt. Well, what would have happened if my family had not been able to purchase homes going back for nearly 100 years? Would my family have had the resources to put me through school without entering into student loan debt? And that's really where that generational wealth comes into play, is that it's not that everyone is rich, but we have cushions that come with having a home and having that source of equity and savings that is built in. It helps smooth out the rough edges when we go through tough financial times. And not every family has had the same opportunities that mine had. And it's stunning to me that this map really reflects where we are with opportunity today based on race.
Yes, it's very telling. Brian, do you all expect to update these maps in the future?
Of course we will. As we get another data dump from the census, probably in a couple of years, you'll start to see another round of maps like this, but we don't expect it to change very much.
Yes.
If anything, it's probably worsened. You see some, in Preble County, you see some yellow and brown hues, as well as parts of Miami County. And that's the rural poverty, the rural poor, lack of access to opportunity as well. but it's throughout our region, and so that's why we couldn't just let this map and that study sit. We had to really put it into action.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Have you known of other communities after seeing this? Have they followed the lead? Have they produced such maps for their own planning?
Yeah, we have been helpful in the eastern New Jersey area. Has kind of modeled a similar study after ours, and we talked. We shared with them our methodology, and they certainly put it into action. The eastern Pennsylvania area as well has taken this on. So it's been kind of a contribution to our profession because there's dozens and dozens of communities around the country that have this similar history as Dayton. Also in a lot of these areas that are in brown, there are also large factories. There were considerable, it's good to get a job if you live near it, but what about the environmental and health consequences of that with pollution? And this was before the Environmental Protection Agency and laws were put into place. I think we're seeing those effects too when we talk about health consequences and things like that. So no, it's been great to contribute to our profession with this information and this approach to analysis.
Yes, congratulations for that good work. Let's talk about the lasting impacts on a number of different topics that the federal government and the Home Ownership Loan Authority made by producing these maps, which Kristine has pointed out were one time. How would you all say that it has impacted the housing markets and the availability of housing that we have today?
Well, anecdotally, in conversations I've had with city leaders, there's a real need for market rate housing in West Dayton, but if the cost to build the house is more than the market value of the house. And so that makes it, then you get into this terrible cycle where you can't get more housing because you're going to do it at a loss. And what is that challenge? And there's a great article from the Washington Post. And again, this is something we see at a national level. And so Michelle Singletary, who's the personal finance columnist for the Washington Post, and if you listen to NPR like I do, you're probably familiar with her. And she wrote an article about how she lives in a Black community in Washington, D.C. Her house is worth $300,000. And basically the same house in a white neighborhood is worth $700,000. And so there's a huge gap in Black and white household wealth. And so the median household wealth nationally and adjusted for inflation is $13,000. So $13,000 is the median Black household wealth. For white families, $149,703.
That's an enormous
versus almost 150,000, and that impacts our entire community when we have folks that are under-resourced systemically. That means that the gaps we have just perpetuate ourselves. And I am very glad to bring this exhibit to Dayton to do awareness building. But what I'd really like to see is that we have a conversation about what policies and practices do we need to put into place so that we can remove the red line, so to say, remove the barriers that have created these stunning disparities in household wealth.
Yes, yes. Let's also talk about a little bit about the social determinants of health, which of course impacts education in so many areas and impact our whole quality of life in our community. why don't we touch a bit on the economic stability in areas that that were redlined and those that were determined to be first-class properties, so to speak. You touched on it a bit, but please say a little bit more.
Well, I will say that I'm not a social determinants of health expert, but what I do know is that the more education you have, the more income you make, your life expectancy is higher, you're more likely to vote and be involved in community institutions, and also the better healthcare you have access to, and you have the resources to take better care of yourself. So one of the things I like to say is that we get more information about how much it's going to cost to get our car fixed than when we go to the doctor for medical procedures. And so in low wealth communities, there can be a real fear around going to the doctor because you really don't know what you're walking into. And if you are trying to struggle to make ends meet, to pay your rent and buy food, to make your car payment or pay for gas to get to work, you're going to stay away from doctors because, you could just fall down the rabbit hole with healthcare costs that are not built into your budget.
Definitely. And in fact, those were healthcare costs and indebtedness were one of the reasons for the problems that we had with housing markets in the 80s. We had so much medical debt. Brian, would you like to touch on some of those social determinants of health?
Right. Yeah, I think I jumped the gun a little bit earlier on it, but just talking about the environmental effects over time, and we certainly, I know that our health department here is very focused on infant mortality in these areas that were redlined and graded D. So yeah, it just continues to affect us generation after generation in terms of family wealth and being able to pass on proceeds from the sale of your house to your kids, to also environmental and health consequences as well. So it's really it's been quite hazardous and quite impactful on all of our region. And so that's why we're proud to have this exhibit here, and that's why the conversations need to continue.
Right. Thank you. That's wonderful. Yes, there's reasons why there are hospitals built in certain areas and where we have our dumps in certain areas, and going all the way back to a federal policy that happened in the 1930s. And I'm so glad this exhibit is here to make more people aware of this. How has this exhibit been tailored locally, Kristina? As you all brought this, it was designed as a national exploration of this impact of redlining, but there are parts and pieces, very important parts and pieces, that come from Dayton and Montgomery County and surrounding counties that are involved in this. Can you speak a little bit about how that was put together?
I was lucky enough to work with an incredible team of folks from the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission, from the library, from the city and the University of Dayton, and Sinclair, and neighborhood leaders. And we were able to identify some Daytonians who were impacted by redlining, whether they personally were impacted by redlining or where their families live were impacted by redlining. And so we were able to draw on historical research to determine some key points in the city's history, but then also gather stories from folks young and old to talk about how redlining impacted them and continues to impact them today.
Good, thank you.
Like Herb Burton and Deja Demings and Renita Haas Saunders, and lots of, the power is in those folks' stories. These are people that we know and that we all we can learn by sharing each other's stories.
Right. Exactly. And sharing a different part of the story than sheer numbers. You know, that the human side numbers are important. They say it all, but the human side of it is equally as important. So, Brian, would you like to talk a little bit about the role of MVRPC in enabling the regional enhancement?
No, it was awesome to have our staff involved with conducting several interviews with people that have lived through this. They grew up in Dayton or moved to Dayton, and then to have the multiple generations to put their perspective on the effect it had on their family and on their communities and their time growing up in Dayton. So we wanted this local flavor to be a key part of this, and it went off very successfully. So very happy to have that contribution.
Yes, and it as I toured the exhibit myself, and there's a picture for the viewers there of one of the timelines that with people attending the exhibit. It does start with the one of the original redlining maps, which we'll see in a minute, and then it moves to show this overlay of different local events in history. So both young and old in viewing this exhibit could that right now the viewers are seeing the first exhibit, which is the redlining exhibit in the Bronx. There's an opportunity for people to put a pin in the exhibit as to where they live now, and also then to put a pin if they have moved to where they have moved, looking at the migration that has happened over time in this exhibit. And the local stories that people are seeing here are told in various different formats. They're there on the timeline, but they're also told in a video. Kristine, would you like to highlight any more about the video for our viewers?
Well, I want to thank the folks at DATV because they are doing yeoman's work of taking each one of the interviews and which were conducted over Zoom and bringing them to life. So I'm excited to see those on DATV. And then we do have I hate to call it a highlight reel, but we've got a trailer that's got some of the high points of folks' stories. And that's on YouTube at youtube.com/learn-to-earn-Dayton. And I think that you might be showing it.
I don't have that in today's program, but there are some pictures coming up which may touch on that, I hope, but we're not showing the actual video. I didn't want to take it away from people getting to go to the exhibit. We want them to get to see it there, but it was definitely a hit the day that I visited and the people that I was touring with. So this exhibit has several different facets to it. There's a load of information, which is so very interesting, but then it also has the video format, and there's opportunity led by the docents for people who are viewing the exhibit to have some discussion while they're going through it. And the participants in the day that I visited really enjoyed that opportunity to talk about Dayton and their experience of Dayton. And some of the younger students were quite amazed at what they had learned. One of the questions I would like for one of you to kind of address is that when I toured the exhibit, one young person asked, well, where's the redlining exhibit of today? Where do we look like today? So I'd like for one of you to help answer that young person's question, please.
Well, I think it's the opportunity map that the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission put together. Dayton is still one of the most segregated cities in America. It is, the Human Rights Commission has actually brought suit against insurance companies for not insuring properties in predominantly Black communities. It is still hard to get mortgages in communities that are predominantly Black communities. And again, the cost of actually building a house is higher than the market value of the house. And so if you look at the opportunity map, that is not just household wealth or income, it's also access. It is the environmental quality that you have in your life. It is the access to health care. It is your food security. It is the quality of education you have an opportunity to get. And so all of these things just keep perpetuating themselves. And we haven't even touched on policing and how communities are differently impacted by policing practices. And so all these things add up to giant systems. Now, the good news is that we as citizens have the power to dismantle some of these systems and create more equitable opportunity. And so I don't want to lose sight of that, that, you know, just as these came about through public policies, we have the opportunity to create new public policies that will give each person an opportunity to live, grow, and thrive.
Right. I think that you have helped us, Kristina, get to a piece of the final exhibit that deals with where do we go from here. So why don't, Kristina, why don't you start, and then I'll come back to Brian. How does this piece fit in from your point of view to what the viewers that are seeing this exhibit and coming into the exhibit, how do you think this will help us go forward, and how was that designed?
Creating awareness is not enough. If we're just aware of our history, that's nice, but that is not really going to help our community move forward. And one of our challenges is that we don't have a shared language around why these racial disparities exist in the way that you might in the Deep South. So this redlining exhibit, one of the goals is to give us some shared language, some tools to understand, and then what do we want to do about it? And so I've only been in Dayton for about a year. I moved here last year during the pandemic from Birmingham, Alabama, and I am really interested to hear from Daytonians about what would they like to change as a result of the knowledge they've gained at Undesign the Redline.
Very good. Brian.
Yeah, I agree. Kristina did a great job of providing the overview. I would just say that, you know, what redlining really means and how it has impacted Dayton and other communities is really large. It shows the impact of our federal government and perpetuated by our state governments and other institutions, as well as the business community. You know, the business community, corporations are not going to pay more, you know, necessarily to invest. So that up to now, that's just been the biggest concern. Why should we pay more here when we can get it cheaper there in a greenfield as opposed to in an urban neighborhood with better access to transportation and other infrastructure that we need? And this continues. And so the dialogue is needed. You know, awareness, certainly we're doing that. The discussion certainly needs to happen. And then we all have to work together to take actions, to form those needed corporations or partnerships that can focus on redevelopment, to figure out how to crack this nut, to how to make these communities more attractive, more affordable to investment within our region, coming from within our region, as well as from outside of our region. And I know that there are partner organizations that are working on that. You know, there's only so much that the city or the county itself can do, but we can definitely try to turn that rudder for our ship and get that started anyway. No, it's not going to happen immediate. If you remember, you know, GM leaving our region in Moraine, you know, that was like a dagger for all of us. We felt that. And it took some time, you know, for Fuyao to come in and into that factory site and to be a thriving business today. And so we need similar actions to be taken for these traditionally redlined communities so that our entire region can benefit, so that we're all stronger when everyone has access to opportunity, when everyone benefits. We're stronger as a region. Our region, once those individuals start to thrive and those communities thrive, our entire region will thrive. Otherwise, you're pulling an anchor. You're pulling. You've got to make sure that everyone has the same access to opportunity as everyone else, and so that's what we're about with this equity initiative. And it's just so important for everyone in our region to do something, to become aware, to have the discussion, and then help us determine what's needed to right the past wrongs.
Good. Thank you very much for those good remarks. I want to let our viewers know that while this exhibit is at the Dayton and Montgomery County Library until September the 25th, that there are still going to be opportunities to see this at other sites. And it will be moving to the University of Dayton for a time. Following that, it will be going to Sinclair Community College. It will be shown at Trotwood Madison City Schools, at Wright State University, and at Corinthian Baptist Church, and then finally ending up at the hub, if we in fact, I say ending up, if we in fact let it go, but or take it down. But there's thought already, I think, to keep it longer, as some other areas have done. So viewers will have an opportunity to see that. But as far as our importance here on social distancing, people are all wearing masks at the exhibit, and as you can see, people are keeping a bit of a distance. Kristina and Brian, do you all know if there are plans to have docents at the other sites as they do at the library?
Yes, each site has the opportunity to have docents trained by Designing the We, which are the creators of the exhibit. And Dayton Metro Library also did a video tour. So if you're not able to get down to the library, on the Dayton Metro Library's YouTube channel, they do have a video tour. So that's another way to get the content. Or if you have questions, you went and saw it on your own and you have questions and want to learn more, that's another opportunity to learn more. And I will tell you that we're going to have it in town into May. The Tip City Library is interested in bringing it from mid-April to mid-May.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it's good to know about the video for those who maybe just can't get down to any of these sites to see it. It's good to know they can still take advantage of it online. What was some of the most challenging parts of putting this together?
Oh, paring it down. I mean, that is always the hardest thing. And it's much harder to write 200 words than it is to write 200 pages, I think. And so we had such, incredible content and wanted to be mindful to tell ordinary folks' stories. Everyone's got a story to tell, but we wanted to bring some fresh perspective and multiple perspectives to the work. And so I think that was also a challenge, but it was a good challenge.
Brian, did you have a challenge you wanted to identify, or?
Just the obvious one, the pandemic.
Yes, of course.
I know that we could have had it here earlier last year, but I know that we, we're considerate of, social distancing and everyone's interest in getting out. I'm glad that we hit this window where people are venturing out more, still socially distanced and with masks, but that's better than a completely video, tour. You got to see it in person and have the interaction and dialogue. So definitely COVID was a hurdle and a consideration, but thankfully vaccinations, and we learned more about the virus. So that was certainly helpful.
Yes, thank you for adding that. I just wanted to make a comment too about the docents. They are trained to encourage participant interaction in this exhibit, which is really, I think, different. It's not normal in a traveling exhibit. Normally a person goes and a person reads and a person sees it, but they are encouraging dialogue in the course of this exhibit. And I'd like to know if either one of you would like to comment on that.
The docents certainly bring it all to life. I'm not sure about the level of interaction, but if you can stick a pin, on a board, that's a great way of being involved and showing, how you are affected by this. Also, the ability to put Post-it notes up or drop letters, along the exhibit based on your experience with all of this is very important too.
Right. And there is part of the booklet that one receives when visiting the exhibit. There's a generous section for notes. And I can just attest that the viewers that were visiting Saturday before last when I was there were very actively taking down notes. There was much that was being learned and much that was being exchanged in the course of that particular tour. Would you like to say a little bit, Kristine? We don't have a lot of time left, but I wanted to ask a little bit about your hopes for the school-age children taking a look at this exhibit.
Yes, so with our partnership with Dayton Metro Library and the Montgomery County Educational Service Center, we were able to develop a curriculum for high school-aged youth to have an opportunity to experience the exhibit and for their educators to give them some tools to interpret what they've seen. And so it's important for young people to understand our history, to understand that we can't just wave a magic wand and make our challenges go away, and to understand who has benefited and who has been hurt by systemic racism and by the impacts of redlining. And so it is, education and that awareness building and that understanding is the first step to removing the red line.
Good, thank you, because I think it can make a very large impact on young people who had probably not heard the word or much about redlining in their normal curriculum and in their lives. So thank you very much for that. Our time is going quickly, but I just wanted to give each of you an opportunity for any comments you want to make that I may not have asked you. I may have left out a question that's important to you, or you may have some concluding thoughts about this exhibit that you'd like to share before we conclude.
I would just want to conclude and get back to the idea of education. So when I was coming up and when I was going to law school, we talked about de facto segregation versus de jure segregation. So segregation in fact and segregation in law. And we were taught that residential patterns came about because of personal preferences. And so what this exhibit uncovers is that there really is no such thing as de facto segregation. Our communities were organized intentionally, and we're living through the results of that today. And so while places like Dayton didn't have the same kind of laws on the books that, Birmingham, Alabama did, or Little Rock, Arkansas, it doesn't mean that there weren't policies, practices, and laws that created a community where Black families are much less prosperous than white families. And so I think that is a really important understanding for us to take away from this, is that our residential patterns, our wealth, were not accidents created from personal choice. They were really intentionally created through law and policy. And that, again, we have the opportunity to change that public law and policy and remove the red line from our communities.
Thank you. That's a very good point, because it is now not legal to redline, but yet the impact of it lives on very strongly. Yes, indeed. Brian, would you have some thoughts you'd like to share?
Just really quick, redlining is a real thing. It happened right here in Dayton. Learn more about it. Get involved. The Dayton Metro Library has compiled numerous resources on the topic here in Dayton as well as throughout the country. So if you just go to the Dayton Metro Library website, you can definitely find considerable, numerous books and videos on the topic, as well as the video that was mentioned earlier of the Undersign the Redlining Exhibit. So just get involved. We need your participation. We need your ideas. We need your thoughts to help our community to progress, to be all that we want it to be. So thanks again, Diane, for your hosting of this show, and it's been wonderful to participate.
Well, thank you both very much, and so much information here. And as I mentioned earlier, this show will replay again. It'll be available on YouTube. For those that came in the middle or are coming in at the end and missed part of that, you still have an opportunity to see it. So thank you both to both my guests, Brian and Kristina. I really appreciate your talking with me today about the Undesign the Redline exhibit. I agree with you both. Everyone in Dayton should, in the Dayton area, should make an effort to get there to see this wonderful and revealing exhibit. So thanks to you very much. I appreciate it. And thanks to the viewers. Goodbye.